I'm going to show how to create a Web API server application using Entity Framework 6 attached to a Microsoft Access database. I'm also going to use IdentityManager by Brock Allen to manage user and roles. Actually, this is not really a tutorial, it's more a walkthrough and a demo of JetEntityFrameworkProvider. It shows you how to create a very simple Web API application using existing technology. So let's start. I can start with a new project, web application, API simple. Web API, we leave all to the default. It's fine. Yeah. And Visual Studio generates for us the base project. Then we need to include JetEntityFrameworkProvider. We can download it using Nugget. This. Okay. Install. It uses Entity Framework 6.1.3, while Web API, the project, has been created with 6.1.1, so we need to restart Visual Studio. And now everything should be fine. To connect to an Access database, we need also to create an empty database. While Visual Studio is loading, we can do it. We can create a new database. Sorry, my Access is in Italian. We create it in temp directory, so /my database is fine. Okay. This is an empty database. We can close this table, so now it's empty. Okay. So the first thing that we have to do is to configure webconfig. We have to configure the right connection. So the connection is this one, connection string, and provider name. JetEntityFrameworkProvider uses a standard OLEDB connection. So we have also to change this. I copy paste the connection string. It is more simple. Okay, here. Okay. Then we also need to update the entity framework section because Entity Framework Provider does not update web.config. I copy paste also this part. It's just one row that I probably need to add, but I copy paste mine. So okay, so here the row, this is the row that I should add, the only things that has changed. I need also to add a system data section to add a provider factory for JetEntity Framework. I copy paste also this. This is the only part I need. I show you everything. Okay. Here I have also SQL Server CE provider, but actually I can leave it. I can remove it. It's not important. important part is this one. Okay. Now we can start. Let's start application to see if it works fine. Okay, it starts. Let's see API. Okay, we have account API to handle users and roles and so on. We have also this API that is generated by the standard application, the standard in the standard application, but we don't use it. It's it's not attached to database to the database. Okay, let's close it. Now we have to create an entity, a sample entity, and we have to insert it inside the default the context. I'm going to use the default context of a WebAPI sample. In a real application, usually I use to insert the model in another project, so I can share the model um, between different interfaces, not only with this interface, this WebAPI interface. So the models in the standard application, in the default application, is here. Here we have the context in identity model. Here we have the application context, and we can also add our entity here, our sample entity here. Create a new class. Person. We can have ID. This will be the primary key. We can also have prop string name and prop int age. So ID is the primary key auto increment. Entity framework by default does this. We have also the name of the person. That is a limited string. We can also this, and we have optional age. Now we can add it to the context. Here is the default context. We have db set, and this db set of person and people. Okay, so we have all the application. Let's build to see if everything is okay. Yes, it's okay. And now we have to write the controller for this new entity. We can build it in the standard way. We go to the controllers directory, choose add, and we can add new controller. WebAPI 2, okay. And we have several classes, so it's better that I write here. Person, it's the model class is person. Our context is application context, and the controller name is people controller is fine. So now we have also the controller. Let's have a look to the controller, people controller. Visual Studio generates for us a lot of interesting code. We will use only this API, only this API, get API, to download a person. We can start the application again. Now the API should contain also our just created entity. People, okay, we have people, and we can see everything of this sample of JSON and so on. Let's try it. I remember API /people/1. Okay, I had read it before. Doing this, we don't have any entity in the database, so we will WebAPI will throw 404 error, so not found error 404. We can have a look to database. Sorry, access. The database is not empty anymore. We have a people table that is our table. We have some tables related to ASP.NET security, and we have migration history that is related to entity framework. People table is not. But the structure generated by entity framework is the structure that we have in our code first model. We can add a name. Name could be my name, that is Ruby, and age 46. I am 46. So now we have one. If I refresh this page, I will be able to retrieve my person. I have now a JSON file. I can download. I can open it, and in the JSON file there is the information I expect. Okay. I'm not going to show you how to close access to the web APIs. It's very simple with attributes, and you can find a lot of documentation around. I show you how to integrate IdentityManager from Brock Allen. It's a really great library, and I use it for my sites. And it allows us to configure users and roles and so on. We can download, stop the project again. We can download it from Bucket as well. Okay, IdentityManager. So it's this one. So we have some libraries. We need IdentityManager, that is a common library, and we need ASP.NET Identity, that is ASP.NET Identity implementation. The third is a custom implementation, membership remote. Okay, our project has changed. Now, with IdentityManager, there are several options that you can enable and disable. I'm going to use a very simple configuration. On Brock Allen site, you have some very good tutorials and some documentation that you can use to configure it, configure IdentityManager in the way you like. If you use it in the default way, you have just to configure some services and initialize it. It's very simple to do it. So I create a new directory for IdentityManager classes, just one, IdentityManager, and I create a new class, application IdentityManager services. I just copy paste my class here. It's quite simple. It's quite simple, this class. In IdentityManager, you configure. Manager. Okay, now it's fine. In IdentityManager, you can configure your store, and the role manager for IdentityManager. I'm using my context for the store, and I'm using the standard role manager for the ASP.NET standard role manager for managing roles. We have also to initialize these classes, and initialization usually are in Upstart, so I create a new file here. And it will be a partial configuration of the startup class. I copy paste also this, so and I will show you what I'm doing. Here I'm just mapping the IDM URL to IdentityManager, and I'm configuring it with the localhost security, so I can connect to IdentityManager only from localhost. No more security. You can configure a lot of things here. By default, IdentityManager uses HTTPS. You can change it here. You can have a look to Brock Allen documentation to see how to do all of this configuration. We also need to call this from the startup, and the startup is here. Configuration, we can call it configure identity manager. Okay, it's in this class, so we see it directly. And we also need to change WebAPI. Sorry, I said Identity Manager uses HTTPS, so we need to configure WebAPI sample to use HTTPS. Okay, so we have SSL enable true. I have already. You should have false. I have already true here because I made a similar project before, so I have true. But here you have false. This is the first configuration that you have to do. The second configuration, if you want to start your application with the key F5, you can copy this URL and put it here, so when you press F5 it will start this application. There is also another change that you have to do that it's in webconfig. It's related to the fact that ASP usually thinks that files are on disk, while some resources of Identity Manager is included in the library. So we need to say to ASP.NET that the modules should be run for every request. Modules RAM. This is RAM option, and for every request our module will be run. Particularly, it will be run Identity Manager. So when the user has some pages about Identity Manager, it will be served by Identity Manager. If you don't insert this, you will see white pages. Okay, everything should be fine. Let's start our project. A home page. Okay, we can insert IDM. So now we run a Brock Allen application. We can create a new user. Me. Password. We can create the new user. We can create new roles. For example, admin. We can create also a new role. We can call it user. Great. And now we have two roles. And now we can see the user, edit the user, and associate the role to the user. Okay, now we have our user everything is written on our database. We have two roles, we have an user, and we have ESP, we have all roles. There are a lot of things that you can do with Identity Manager. We can also add fields, we can do a lot of things. On Brock Allen site, you can find several more information. Now we could configure security in our application using proper attributes on controllers, and with Identity Manager we can configure user and rules. Our end user can configure user and rules. Thanks for seeing.